had an experience of time travel, which was really, really bizarre, where I walked by my son's former room. He's been away for a couple of years at a foreign university, and he was sitting in his chair. I mean, it was so real, and I was a little bit taken aback initially, but I grokked what was happening, and then I was kicked out of it because one of the things I've been doing in my inner alchemy work is learning to project my consciousness in time and to actually go back to former episodes where I experienced trauma, for example, and to then use the faculty of my imagination and my breath to pull in that trauma into my body and reclaim that energy that was lost. So I've actually been practicing doing the kind of thing that just showed up in my waking life when I had this dreaming awake form of time travel.
Speaking to Sol Luckman today on the subject of getting out of here alive. His book is titled Getting Out of Here Alive, I believe. I did read a part of it. We're going to be talking about immortality and whatever comes along. Hi, Sol, welcome.
Hi there, Zorina. Thanks for having me on your show today.
My pleasure, my deep interest in the subject as well. I've explored the subject of immortality from various authors. I've spoken to energy healers, to Shaman Joe Fox Dreamer, whom I hosted for 3 years in a row on my platform. Shout out to Joe Fox Dreamer, by the way.
Nice.
I've spoken about immortality with him as well. And I'm very curious in the subject. Tell us a bit about you. I know you have a lot of credentials. You're on Substack. You're an author of a few books. I think some of them are even bestsellers. I'm not quite sure. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Sol Luckman, and I'm at solluckman.substack.com if you want to go explore my work, which is very diverse. I've written novels, I've written nonfiction in the field of healing, I've written self-help nonfiction, I've written humor and memoir and song lyrics, and I am now foraying into a deep dive into inner alchemy, immortality, shamanism, and other energy medicine concepts in this new book, Get Out of Here Alive. So I'm very eclectic in a way, and yet at the same time, I have a profound sense that I really haven't written a lot of different books. I've written one big book, or I am still writing one big book. They're all super interrelated in different ways. Even the fiction is heavily tied into the other models that I utilize in my nonfiction work. So it's quite a big body of work at this point in time, and it just keeps growing.
Mm-hmm. I'm tempted to jump straight into the subject, and but before we do that, I suppose we'd have to clarify a few definitions, like what alive means, and maybe out of here, what is here, before we can move on of what this
Yeah,
is
that's
about.
good actually. Yeah, because I do that to some extent in the book. I talk about here and what I intend by the word here. For me, here is a an illusion that masquerades as a reality. There's a lot of interest these days in simulation theory. I do use the analogy of the Matrix, but when I speak about these things, I actually don't mean some technological matrix where people are plugged in. I mean that we're in a dream. It functions like a simulation. But the concept here is that everything is a dream. All worlds are a dream, are different intensities and frequencies of a giant dreaming. So we can change things much more dramatically than we think because we are in a dream that is a little slower moving perhaps than our normal nocturnal dreams, but is nevertheless quite malleable in a lot of ways. And what I'm exploring in Get Out of Here Alive is how to make those changes, how to turn your life into more of a waking dream. And create miracles of manifestation and health and abundance. But beyond these things, beyond these kind of matrix considerations, these real life considerations, there's the possibility of rethinking what the boundary line is for our existence and reinterpreting what death means and how we can interact with it.
Mhm. I've by coincidence started reading a book that a friend gave me. It's called "You Are This." It's in Bulgarian, so I don't know if it's available in English at all. Um, I'm still at the beginning, but the book starts by making a summary of all the different religions in India, and I think there are seven major religions, and their concepts of the world of creation, of what we are actually living in and what we are. And you mentioned the illusion, and Maya, as we know, is the illusion, translates as not here from the Vedic texts,
Hmm.
which means that according to them, Shiva is the unconscious, basically everything that is there, and Shakti then becomes the force that creates everything in existence that as we know it, including the subconscious, so everything visible and invisible, but away from the unconscious.
My working concept is similar in a sense. It's that the the energy that we're talking about is a kind of source consciousness, and you could equate it to galactic center. It's also known as the Great Central Sun. It's called Senteatl or the Great Eagle or the Black Eagle or the Eagle, and a lot of forms of shamanism. And it's the force at the center of things that expands outward to experience itself in multiplicity. And in a sense, that is Shiva dreaming. And the energy that comes out of that dreaming process is the Shakti or the prana or the chi. I think of it as the imagination. You could call it mojo. You could call it whatever you want to. It is the force that builds worlds. And so
Exactly. Now I remember this was my point that actually the Maya comes out of Shakti, out of the force. Yes.
yes,
Hmm.
yes. So the force is the real thing. The manifest world that it creates is the illusion. So we're talking about a phenomenon and an epiphenomenon. So the reality that we take for granted is actually a side effect of something that is more primary than that, and is ultimately more quote unquote real. I think it's all just variations on the dream energy, personally. Even the Shakti is the primal movement of the dreaming God.
Hmm.
And so, and again, the God could be dreaming or dreaming awake or some combination. So it's not necessarily someone who's lost in the unconscious. I do go into the relationship between the unconscious mind, the so-called conscious mind, and the subconscious in some depth in this book, and I bring to it a kind of inner alchemy understanding of how those relate and how they even came about and how they relate to human evolution.
Hmm. How did you come up with this knowledge? How did you learn this, or how did you download it?
I've been doing this for a really long time. I started out over 2 decades ago looking at the relationship between sound and DNA. I came up with the term inner genetic to describe this interface where sound and light, for that matter, can interface with particularly the portion of DNA that's called junk DNA to reach into the bioenergy blueprint, the aura, and manipulate it, change things around. And when you can heal distortions and traumas stored in the blueprint, then the body, mind, and spirit can all heal. So I've been on this path for a very, very long time. And I've gone through lots of study of shamanism, different types of shamanism, different types of energy work, understanding of the body, and then looking into alchemy and internal alchemy through Qigong, which I practiced for a very long time, and inner alchemy, which is more of a westernized tradition that is somewhat related to internal alchemy in the East, but it's just more Western, for lack of a better word. And one of the best series of books on that subject which was very inspirational to me, was John Criter's magnum opus trilogy, where he basically laid out a very no frills, pragmatic understanding of the workings of inner alchemy and how to unite the conscious mind with the unconscious reservoir of our potential via the subconscious mechanism. It's quite fascinating. And he likens that to the tria prima of alchemy, which is the sacred uh, trinary recipe of alchemy.
So when you say you're activating junk DNA, is your belief that our DNA has been altered by aliens, or is it not active because we haven't reached this stage in evolution?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I do talk about DNA in Get Out of Here Alive. And I know that there are lots of people out there who say DNA doesn't even exist, which is a very interesting assertion. And I address that very specifically in this book because my initial question had to do with the nature of knowledge and the scientific method. And it went like this. Is the scientific method broken or did it never exist in the first place? Because the more I went down the rabbit hole of philosophical skepticism, which basically, is a challenge to anything considered to be um, real with in a dogmatic way, the more I began to question the nature of the laws of nature, the laws of science, the scientific method. And what I basically concluded was, and I lay this out in this new book, is that everything is essentially a thought form. It's a thought form produced by a focalization of the imagination. And sometimes we do that consciously. Sometimes our imagination is hijacked and things are created with it that are not for anyone's benefit, except maybe a chosen few. So we have to rethink what we even mean when we say we are this or we are that, because we are what we dream ourselves to be. One of the reasons I believe why there were giants in the historical record is that there was a time when we dreamed those giants. Our collective dreaming agreed that giants could exist, and they existed. Okay. Now that doesn't appear to be the case because the dreaming has changed and we've changed the world. Similarly, I believe DNA is an egregore, a tulpa, a mental, it's a thought form, just like everything else, just like you are, just like I am, and everyone else. So we have now agreed that DNA is a certain thing, but it's always up for a kind of discourse or discursive debate on what it is, where it came from, what it can do, and the spin doctors, those who control discourse, will always direct it in certain directions, having to do with you're determined by your genes and all this business. Then we have epigenetics, which is this idea that we have some control over our genetic expression, and then I actually believe that we have the ability to utilize genetics to go way beyond the human condition itself in terms of building our energy, focusing our imagination, and becoming quite a different being ultimately. So that's where I put my focus. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but I wanted to bring up those different ways of looking.
I do want to move on to the actual topic of the book, which is immortality and getting out here alive. But I also want to ask you one question regarding the DNA, and because you brought up the dreaming of the reality. So, do you believe it's a consensus, the way we perceive DNA at the moment, the way we construct this reality, and for us it is, right? The way we perceive it for us is reality. So is this based on consensus?
Well, consensus is a not the best word, but I don't have necessarily a better word. There is a kind of collective focusing of the imagination that can create what you might call consensus. It's not exactly like informed consent. People's
Sure, sure.
being taught that something is real, they believe it, they energize it with that focus, then their imagination helps create the thing that they were told is real, right? It's this really crazy circle that happens. It's
Yes.
the
So,
whole
okay.
idea, if you read Rene Girard's work on mimetic theory, he talks about mimetic desire and how basically your desire, your belief can be molded and then hijacked and utilized to create really good things or really bad things on the group consensus level.
Mm.
What I'm more interested in is the power of the individual to create so much energy and to hone their ability to focus their imagination such that they no longer need the collective to go beyond what is theoretically possible.
Have you made some research of your own of how much you can impact on your own using, or to what degree, what scope of impact you can have on your own if you've honed your energy to this level?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm engaged in energy work, shamanism, and inner alchemy on a daily basis, and I've had a number of what you might call supernatural or mystical events in my life and in my process. Most recently, I had an experience of time travel, which was really, really bizarre, where I walked by my son's former room. He's been away for a couple of years at a foreign university, and he was sitting in his chair. I mean, it was so real, and I was a little bit taken aback initially, but I grokked what was happening, and then I was kicked out of it because one of the things I've been doing in my inner alchemy work is learning to project my consciousness in time and to actually go back to former episodes where I experienced trauma, for example, and to then use the faculty of my imagination and my breath to pull in that trauma into my body and reclaim that energy that was lost. So I've actually been practicing doing the kind of thing that just showed up in my waking life just the other day when I had this what felt like, a direct waking, dreaming awake form of time travel.
I've also practiced reprogramming of the mind in the past, and including trauma healing and karma healing and all of these things. And but the way I perceive it, it's more like an inner work. It's not like you're actually projecting your physical body that would even look similar to a hologram or something like that. Was this your experience, or was it still in your mind?
No, this was very physical. This was quite a real event for me. And the model that I'm using is that when you dream, when you project your consciousness, there is no just dreaming. There is no just imagining. All of these are real events in different dimensions, in different timelines. We don't have the liberty of just doing anything. Anywhere we project the consciousness, it creates. So the idea with inner alchemy is that one of the things you want to do is spend enough time getting to know your dream body, your etheric double. There are other names for it. Getting to know it so minutely and energizing its reality with your mind, doing these various exercises that when you die consciously, you can step into your dream body and not skip a beat and sail off into eternity.
Okay, let's talk about reality
Because
then.
because in that instance, you have created a a facsimile of your physical body. You can actually create different bodies if you wanted to. You could create a younger version of yourself. You could create a healthier version of yourself or a more robust version. All of these things are possible. But in any case, you've created something that is absolutely functional and it's aligned with you such that you can literally just step into it.
But it will still be your ethereal body, like you wouldn't be and maybe okay, let's talk about reality because this opens up questions of what happens after death and what's the point of reincarnation and all of these things which I would like to touch according to your knowledge and the way you perceive it.
So
So,
yeah,
yeah.
the idea is that when you do what I'm describing, this kind of conscious death, and this type of thing has been documented, whether we look at the rainbow body tradition in Tibet, or the fire from within tradition, or the Dokchen lucid dreaming tradition, uh, the whole light dreaming. The body very often, that yourself, when you do this, will just appear to disappear. It will just fade out of the room, and you will not be leaving behind a body. You will just be actually taking your dream body
Incinerated in a way
in a way
without.
into the other realm. And some people can go back and forth, and that's been documented as well.
This is this been, what was his name in India? Bhagavan.
Bhagavan.
Yeah, I believe his appearance has been documented a few times. And then there was uh, a person from San Francisco that also was in communication with, at least he said, 6 people that were able to do that, step in and out of reality and in their bodies. And one of them was Bhagavan. And I believe I have this book. And he was talking about immortality in the body. I guess what you're talking about, but he passed away. I don't know if he's able to
Well, there's
come in now.
Aurobindo. He wrote a lot about this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's
Um,
him.
yeah. He had a lot to say, and I've written about him in my books on regenetics, specifically conscious healing, where I was looking into the light body and the idea that what happens when you activate that body is what this biochemist named Colm Kellerer called a transposition burst, where your genes, rather than just a few switching epigenetically, to change some behaviors or some conditions, that a transposition burst would involve the simultaneous uh, awakening and silencing of tens of thousands of genes. And you literally would become a different species in real time.
What you're saying is this is what was described by the book, and this is what it's meant by the body disappearing physically and coming in and out of physical reality.
I'm saying that's one way of interpreting what
Mm.
happens when you build up that kind of energy and go through that kind of transformation that has produced bursts of light and rainbows and all kinds of things around people who have apparently done it.
I see, I see. Okay, so what normally happens then to people after they die? According to the Vedic tradition and the Eastern philosophies, the soul dissolves in the unconscious. So it becomes, but does it contain still the memory? Somehow it has to, because in the process of reincarnation, it still has access to it. How does it work in your worldview?
Yeah, I mean, that's another really good question. So I mentioned a fascinating quote by John Keats, the English romantic poet, in Get Out of Here Alive. And it goes like this, well, basically the idea is that we are in a vale, V-A-L-E, like a valley of soul making. And that is a very heavy thought, because what it basically means, and this is what he essentially intended by it, is that we are not souls before we come here, and we are not necessarily souls when we leave, but we are made into souls in this crucible that we call reality.
So there is no such a thing as your individuation past your death, unless you want to be still individuated.
Yes, which is the alchemical or shamanic path.
Mhm, mhm.
Yes.
Very
Otherwise, what happens to you? And there's nothing wrong with it, actually. It's just a choice, or the lack of a choice, perhaps, if people aren't aware of what their options are. But if you die and you have not built up your ability to visualize in the way I'm describing, or in a parallel way, and you don't have enough personal power or energy or chi or prana or kundalini, whatever you wish to call it, then basically what happens is you, depending on your level of dogma and indoctrination, you go to whatever you think is going to happen after death. And you are given all the time you need to figure out that what you are in is a kind of holodeck illusion that you're creating with your mind, that it's not real. And you are eventually allowed to continue your journey down the Great Rift, down the Black Road through the Milky Way into Galactic Center, and you're re-embraced by the Eagle or the Central Sun and re absorbed by that energy. Your experience is taken into its collective mind, and you lose your individuality. And essentially, at some point in time, you would reincarnate, but not as the same being, not even as the same energy signature or anything like that. You would just be your energy would be reused to create another experience that wouldn't directly connect to you.
Hmm.
At the same time, there's all kinds of different timelines. It's very sci-fi in a way where you think it's just you existing here, but really it's a whole bunch of you who came in on different, having different timelines, different experiences, because the brilliance of the human energy is such that it allows for that multiplicity. So it's almost like the sleeping God, is multitasking by having each incarnation multiply itself many, many times. So that's that many more experiences that the dreaming God gets to dream.
Hmm. Okay, so I have questions about reincarnation. I'd just like to share my experience with the topic of reincarnation, and then maybe we can also talk from your point of view. So
Sure.
I have worked with groups and of clients using a combination of something derived from the silver method and another method. There are actually a few methods that I'm using for mind reprogramming. And in these sessions, when it comes to trauma clearing and even karma clearing, I came to the conclusion at some point that because the mind is searching for a solution to a current problem, it always creates a seemingly past experience, as in a past life, the person believes, that would solve their problem, or that would explain um, why something is happening to them or what they need to do, or it would show them that something is replaying. But it's a completely different scenario, but it still gives them a clue. And so maybe in some cases, these were indeed past lives, but I believe in most of the cases, what I've observed, people create a very believable for them life, past life, that helps them solve a problem or create or a more orderly view of their world. So when these souls, they do not contain so much power, disintegrate in the central sun, when they come back, do they have access to any information that belongs to them? Because you said their entire character and essence disintegrates. So if we assume that the majority of these people on earth are not shamanic and trained in this art, they're people that have had their souls disintegrated, and it's just another compilation of energy. Are there actually past lives in the sense as we perceive them these days?
I mean, my somewhat sound bite-ish response is that I don't believe that reincarnation is what it's understood to be, that it doesn't happen like that. And I don't think that therefore, I also don't think that past lives happen in the same way. I was fascinated by what you were saying about how you were interpreting people's tendency to maybe create a past experience, because that could be tapping into one of these timelines that I'm talking about. You also have to realize, like in one timeline, you might have died as a young person, and in another timeline, you might live to 100. Even though time is an illusion, we could talk about what that means. The idea here is that you might actually come back into this veil of soul making as another person and still have one of your parallel selves from your previous quote unquote life still active. You may have access to all of that information in some kind of weird warping way. There's also the possibility of just tapping into the greater, you might call the Akashic or the mind of the creator, all of that energy that is the eagle, and actually accessing some of that database. So I don't know that one or the other would be happening. I couldn't tell you in a given situation. I think both could potentially happen to people.
Especially when a lot of people claim to have been, it's already become a joke to have been Jesus Christ or Cleopatra in their past lives because they so vividly access this information from the Akashic records. Um,
Hmm. And that's also a very interesting example of how you can focalize your imagination to create something so seemingly real that it begins to create effects.
mhm,
In this case, it might be an effect that it helps you order your life in some way. Maybe it changes your life because of this knowledge. But the
mhm.
knowledge itself isn't based on anything real. It's just based on your imaginative projection.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Which
My
is also in a sense
goal,
real, as you said.
it is the
Yeah.
only quote unquote real.
Yeah.
My goal is to encourage people to really think outside the box about these things and begin learning how to focus the power of their imagination. It can help you in the long run with this immortality question that we've been chatting about, but it can help you in the short term with your life and your ability to live better, to be healthier, to have a more fulfilling experience in different ways. It's just an important piece of becoming what we can become.
Mhm.
We are that. We are that focus of the imagination. So, or the imagination flowing through a kind of a vessel of perspective.
Yeah. Can you give us a bit of detail of what exactly you're doing with your clients? You said you're working on healing, energy healing, and what are some ways? I know you have specific exercises, but maybe you can share something, not necessarily a whole exercise, but a concept that would help people manifest better or even.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my work in energy medicine goes back a long way. Over 2 decades ago, I was really sick. I had an autoimmune illness, and that's when I developed Regenetics and the Regenetics method. You can find a book called Potentiate Your DNA where you can learn how to do the first part of this method. It's very powerful. It's called potentiation. And it's a form of sound healing where you essentially sing to your DNA and you think to it. And so you're using the focus of your imagination. You're also using your voice to connect with the DNA, to tell the DNA to go into your biofield, to tune it up, to heal it, and to invite that healing back into your daily experience. So that's a kind of no-brainer, something that people can do and get a lot out of pretty quickly. In terms of this new book, Get Out of Here Alive. I teach several different concepts. Not all of them are mine. The book is basically divided into two parts. The first part, if you want to speak in shamanic terms, is the not doings. So the not doings are the things that you stop doing that have been basically taking your energy away, taking your focus away. So I discuss digital detox. I discuss a truther detox, getting off of truther content, doom scrolling, getting out of that whole loop, basically spending time in silence, learning to harness the power of silence and to procrastinate your way to creativity, to get into the moodling state of the brain where you just invite new ideas into your awareness. I have a lot of different things that you can do that are extremely passive and they allow your energy to begin to pool again. And that can then empower you to take on the exercises in the second half of the book, which are the doings. And so the first doing I discuss is shamanic recapitulation, as described in the work of Carlos Castaneda and Taisha Abelar. And that has to do with breathing back, going back and revisiting your traumas and breathing in the energy that you lost in those situations and giving back the energy that you took away from other people. And that's a real house cleaning and a beautiful thing to do. Then I get into techniques from inner alchemy that were inspired by John Kreider's books, having to do with absorbing and reabsorbing your energy. So it's a form of mental projection where you're actually going either back in time or into the future, where a future theoretical timeline that you've energized and created into something pseudo real with your worry, your stress, your doubt, your fear, your concerns, etc. So you can go into those future timelines as well and pull back in the trauma that's being created. Again, time being an illusion, everything happens in a present moment that just appears to have a temporal trajectory to it. Really, it's just a stacking of intensities that we have all around us that we experience as time.
Mhm.
So that's the second thing that I teach people how to do in the book to get started doing that. And then I touch on a new modality that I've developed called pragmalchemy, which is a combination of myofascial release and decompression, breath work, and attention focalization, working the muscles of the imagination in tandem so as to heal the body, mind, and spirit. So you're actually using a block that's kind of like a yoga block. I call it the Ouroboros. That's the snake consuming its tail in alchemy, and you can lie on it, stand on it, put your third eye on it, do all kinds of things that I teach you how to do, very specifically how to do, while breathing in certain ways and pooling in energy and imagining scenarios or outcomes or your dream body, etc., in certain ways. And this is the beginning of the process of pooling all of that energy into the center of your body and packing it down until it begins to create what it has been called the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone is an internal mass of energy that you use to power your creativity and your immortality, not something that is created in some kind of pseudo chemistry laboratory.
Is it in the body, the Philosopher's Stone?
It is if you put it there, if you amass enough energy to build it in the body.
Uh-huh.
In men, it's just behind the navel area, and in women, it's in the womb.
Hmm. The book that I mentioned at the beginning that I'm reading at the moment called You Are This, meaning you are, everything. This um, talks about the fact that there's nothing in the universe that is not present in the body of the human, that is not present in us, not necessarily in the body, but in us.
Yeah, I like that
So
idea.
that could that could actually be translated the other way around. That we project the universe from within us. It goes both ways.
Yeah, I think the reason the Ouroboros is such a powerful analogy for me is that we are that serpent that is consuming and creating itself at the same time. We are the creations of the sleeping God, and we create the sleeping God.
Mhm. Fantastic. Yeah, very interesting. Um, do you have groups or how do you coach? Do you coach people at all on these practices?
I do offer one-on-one coaching for people who want that, whether that's in relation to regenetics or pragmalchemy. I have a website that's phoenixregenetics.org. You can go explore these worlds there.
And otherwise, people who get your book get out of here alive, get out alive,
Get out of here alive.
get out of here alive. Are they going to be able to follow and practice the exercises on their own?
Yes, they're pretty comprehensive. Basically, you can just read the chapter on recapitulation and do that. You can read the chapter on energy reabsorption and do that. If you want to begin learning Pragmalchemy, you can come over to my Substack, solluckman.substack.com, and the first three exercises are available in both text and audio format. So it takes you through exactly how to do the exercises. You can get your own Ouroboros if you want to, but that's optional. You can also use a rolled up towel. And then for people who want to experience Regenetics, there's a free monthly ceremony the first Sunday of every month so that you can experience potentiation that way. You can work with us or other facilitators on an individual basis, or you can learn to do your own potentiation, which you can do for yourself, your family, your friends, your pets, your garden, your business, whatever. Um,
How
and
can people sign
the,
up for the potentiation free
at
course?
phoenixregenetics.org, all of that information is there. The ceremony that I mentioned is called the Worldwide Potentiation Ceremony. And the only thing you would need, other than the book, for performing your own potentiation is a tuning fork, a 528 hertz tuning fork. It's called the Mi note from the ancient solfeggio scale. We offer those for sale. They're also available all over the place online, so you can find that tuning fork very easily. I also created a video tutorial for the process called How to Potentiate Your DNA, and that's over on my Substack. So that's another resource that is a standalone 45-minute video teaching you how to do it, or you can watch that in tandem with reading Potentiate Your DNA. I also do facilitator trainings for people who want to actually offer this to clients, and that's a whole other level of going into things, but that's something else that's available through the Phoenix Center for Regenetics.
Mhm. You mentioned at the beginning that you sang to yourself to heal yourself, and now you're talking about the tuning fork. Um, the human voice was the basis of creation of all existing natural instruments, not computer generated, but all natural instruments. So wouldn't you theoretically be able to tune in your body and heal it with your own voice, like you did yourself?
Oh, that's what you're doing. You're just using the tuning fork to stay on the right note,
Uh-huh.
and it creates rhythm for what you're doing as well. So all that is taught in the methodology.
I see.
So
Hmm.
you are simultaneously singing certain vowels at that note and
Hmm.
thinking certain vowels in combination.
Yeah. Are
And
you
you're
thinking them
you're,
in
you're
color as
singing and
well?
thinking to your DNA. Sorry?
Are you thinking them in color as well?
No, don't need to have the color component. It's enough, believe me, it's enough to it's enough to just do what I'm describing. The color would be a bit much, I
Uh,
think.
okay. Interesting. Okay, I'm not done yet, unless you're in a hurry, but I have
No,
more
no, I'm not in a
questions.
hurry. Thank you. No.
Let's go back to the shamanic way of getting out of here alive. What happens to the body once it disappears? Once you manage to leave, kind of get out of here alive, what happens then to you?
Well, first of all, I think of this as an alternative form of death because you are leaving this reality behind. Usually it seems permanently, or at least in many cases, that's what appears to be happening. My understanding is that you are conflating with your dreaming body, your dream body. So you are becoming one with the etheric double. It is designed for non-local travel in the other world, in the dream time, in the dark sea of awareness. Lots of names. In the second attention, the second world. Many, many names for this other realm that is outside of everything that we perceive as reality. In shamanism, you have the tonal, which is where we live, which is like this little tiny speck in a vast ocean of consciousness that is called the Nahual. So you're basically learning to travel in the Nahual. So when you step into your your dream body, if you've had dreams, for example, where you've woken up crying or laughing or literally having an orgasm or all the things that happen to people, then you can understand how real that experience could be to be in that body. And we think, oh, I'm just going to be living in some facsimile of my body and it won't be as much fun, but it's actually the opposite. It's much more intense. it's much more kaleidoscopic, it's much more technicolor than being in the body because it's basically like what happens in your dreams, but you're learning how to control your body in those dream spaces.
So does it mean that you need to learn very exquisitely to do lucid dreaming while you're still alive in order to be able to control the dream body once you're not here anymore?
Now, in lots of schools of shamanism, the goal, and even Eastern things like Dokchen, the goal is to learn how to lucid dream. In inner alchemy, that is not the goal. The goal is to learn how to lucid dream without ever going to sleep, so that you're dreaming awake. That is also something that is described in shamanism, where they speak about dreaming awake, but the techniques utilized to do that in inner alchemy are quite different. And I think they're more systematized and more effective and much better suited to individuals who are by themselves as opposed to working with a teacher.
When you're saying uh, dreaming awake, this means while you're alive, right?
Well, it
In
means while you're awake, when you do these
Yes,
exercises,
alive and awake. Not
you're alive and you are awake and you're learning to project into your dream body and to connect with it. You're learning to
Mhm.
move it around, to travel with it as in a lucid dream.
Yeah.
You go through, there's a series of different steps that you pass through in this process. In shamanism, these are often referred to as the dreaming gates. John Kreider calls them the rooms of the projectionist. I like to call them mental chambers because it fits a lot of the other language that I'm comfortable using around alchemy, like the idea that you store your energy in your cauldron. There's just other names, so I like to keep it consistent. To me, rooms was just too bland, but that was just my aesthetic. In any case, you're passing through different dreaming gates that represent more intensified dream experiences with different possibilities. And you're learning to master those situations such that you go from just forcing the situation that you're in almost to, you're imagining it so hard and it seems kind of artificial and contrived, like I'm just making this shit up, right? To, oh my God, that's happening and I'm not making this shit up. To, oh my God, that's happening and I am making this shit up, but I'm not making this shit up.
I'm making it up for real.
Yeah, I'm making it up for real. It just got real. And
Mhm.
that's when you actually tap into that vast reservoir of the unconscious and the vast uh, dark sea of awareness that is the Nahual, and you're able to travel in it.
Mhm. What is Nahwal?
It's the second attention, the second world, the dream world, how, different names for it, the other world,
Mhm.
time
So,
and
so
space.
okay, there's this one concept, at least on Earth. I don't know how it works outside of the matter, although it should be similar. So there's this concept of the morphogenic fields that state that whatever experience the first group has had with something, anything, is uh, replicated in the experiences that follow in the steps of the first experience. Let's say you've taken a drug and somebody else taking the same drug will experience the effects of the first group of people that have taken the drug. And this is just the most common example that I give, but it applies to a lot of things. So does this mean that did you say Nahuat?
Nahual.
Nahual? Does this mean that the Nahual is created by the first experiences of the first shamans? Who is it created by? Is it directly created by Shakti?
Yeah, I would say it's created by the dreaming god using Shakti.
Okay.
Now, I really like what you had to say about the whole morphic idea, and I cite Rupert Sheldrake a couple of times in Get Out of Here Alive. Basically, I mean, he even posits that our genetics that they don't really work via. material genes in the way that we think. They basically work like memories of morphic experiences that are
Yeah.
stored in the database of the morphic field. And in this model and in the model of wave genetics that was developed by Vladimir Poponin and Peter Garayev, the idea is that all of our genetic blueprints, what I've been calling the biofield or the bioenergy blueprint or the aura, this is the realm of the Nahual. That's where all of the blueprints are stored.
Mhm.
Dewey Larson would call it time space. It's the counterpart to our world of space time. So when we're accessing that information and healing trauma that's been stored away, we are traveling into that realm in some capacity or otherwise accessing it.
Mhm. Okay. I'm gonna have a throwback to the first part of the conversation that we had regarding the DNA, the the sort of a consensus that we talked about. It's not really consensus, but we agreed to call it consensus temporarily for the lack of a better word.
Sure, sure.
So when it comes to our reality, let's talk about something that some people are convinced of one way or the other, the shape of the earth. Is it flat or is it round? Could this be also a matter of fact of the consensus?
Yes, basically, and we've seen different debates rage in recent years, one having to do with whether a certain germ existed and whether it was causing problems on the world stage. Basically, what you have is you have two groups of people engaging their imagination, fighting against each other for supremacy, and which one will win out on a much larger scale and take over the discourse.
Hmm.
That's what you have. It's
Yeah.
all divide and conquer. It's supposed to be this way. It's engineered via what I call the dragon to loosh or which means to extract the energy of people while controlling them on this loosh farm. So basically, we're looking at a bunch of sheeple fighting each other on a loosh farm, and they don't even know they're on a loosh farm.
Who is the dragon?
The dragon is the great archon, the demiurge, Yaldabaoth, Saklas in Gnosticism, Ahriman, Satan, God of the Old Testament, the alien a god who blows up whole cities. The dragon has many names if you look at it in different historical periods and in different cultures. There's in Castaneda's work, it's called the Flyers or the Mud Shadows. Mesoamerican shamans from another tradition call it the Yeyeli or the Enemy Within is another name. Lots of different names, but basically you could think of it as something like the Mind Flayer from Stranger Things. And it's the also the serpent that entered the garden. And that's a whole story having to do with how we were living in the Garden of Eden, which was the vast reservoir, the vast garden of our unconscious mind. And that's the dream time. And when the dragon entered, it offered us an alternative so that we would know ourselves. This was the fruit of the tree of knowledge. I just go into a story of how we ended up with the conscious mind that we have. And the upshot is that it's not really our mind, it is the mind of the dragon. So that voice that we hear in our minds, that self-defeating, nagging, irrational, hysterical voice sometimes is not our own. It's the mind of the dragon. So a lot of the techniques that I teach are designed to have people basically learn how to silence that voice and reclaim their own mental space.
Hmm. Well, you mentioned that one of the names was the Archons, and I recall listening to, I believe, Archaics, who digs out a lot of ancient texts where I believe in the most ancient text that he quoted, um, the Archons were described as an energy that separated from the original creator energy, and because it had nowhere to feed from, um, it started feeding on the creation of, so from us in a way. But theoretically, if it's out there, it's also in us. So this energy that is the opposing energy already also lives in us. This is the way we are created. If we take the theory of the Ouroboros
Right.
cycle of projection, correct?
Yeah, I mean that's very, very astute. I go into this, and this is an issue that a lot of people have problems with, but I I look at what is known as unity consciousness, and I go all the way, and I take this Ouroboros model, and I go all the way. And when you do that, there is only one of us here. There is no individuality, really. There is a singularity that is experiencing illusions of multiplicity, and that means that we can only be the dragon also.
Yes.
Therefore, we are our own spiritual opponent who is also a kind of spiritual mentor in a kind of tough love way. Like you could think of this not so much as a classroom, but as like a dojo where you're
Mhm.
getting your ass kicked by a
Mhm.
vastly superior opponent or peers vastly superior until you begin to learn what you're capable of, like Neo in the dojo with Morpheus, and he begins to step into his power. And when you do that, you can become stronger than the dragon.
I enjoyed this conversation so much, Sol. You have no idea.
That's very, very sweet of you. I really, I mean, you asked great questions, so that's been a pleasure.
Fantastic. When is your book coming out again?
A week from today, March 20th.
March
So
20th.
people have this week to request a free review copy, so they can go over to my Substack and find where that is. And I'm also serializing the audiobook of Get Out of Here Alive on my Substack, and I read it, so it's me. I'm not a professional reader, but at least it's me, and I know my book, so that counts for something. I
Yeah.
talk about my squeaky little voice, But anyway, that's something I hope people enjoy. People seem to be liking the audiobook so far, so check it out. First two chapters are up, or two sections.
Yeah. Fantastic. So this video will probably come out on an eclipse. Is this good? Or do
Yeah,
we make it good?
works for me. I know, Jordan, we kind of hooked up through Jordan and Waters Above, so he always talks about eclipses have a lot of energy, but sometimes they can be a downturn in the market, and very often that's then followed by a rapid upturn.
Okay, so I'll wait for the eclipse to complete and then I will post this video.
Okay, that works for me.
Fantastic. I had a blast. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I did too. I really appreciate it.